We welcome you to hour number 2 live right here on this National Championship Monday on the early line on SportsGrid. And what a way to begin this second hour of our 3 hours here on TEL than with Jon Rothstein. Bright and early on this Monday morning live from San Antonio in the site of tonight's National Championship game. He is already wearing the suit. He is ready to go. Soon we sleep, but not until the next month. Early here in April, John, a national championship at stake tonight between Houston and Florida. Rothstein joining us on behalf of the FanDuel Sportsbook, and of course, we'll be covering tonight's title game for CBS Sports. As always, John, for the entirety of this college basketball season, we thank you for being here.
Well, Ben, it's great to be with you on this Championship Monday. It's hard to believe that there are only 2 teams left in the 2025 NCAA tournament, but we have the 2 most resilient teams in college basketball in Houston and Florida. And one of the things that I'm really thinking about entering tonight's game is that the late, great coach of Marquette, Al McGuire, who won a national championship in 1977, said that, when you're trying to win a 6-game tournament, normally you need 1 game along the way. That's a white knuckler that you win. Florida and Houston have done that twice each. Houston did it against Purdue, and obviously in that epic comeback Saturday against Duke. Florida did it against UConn in the round of 32, and obviously that epic comeback against Texas Tech. So I have no doubt that these are the 2 most resilient teams in the sport.
Whoever might be trailing at the half, if that does indeed happen tonight, do not turn off your television because we are in for a great one tonight in the national championship game inside the Alamo Dome. But John, to set the stage for the title game, we look back quickly on Final Four Saturday. One of the all-time great comebacks in the history of the Final Four. Houston trailed by as many as 14 points against Duke with just over 8 minutes remaining, down by 6 with just over 30 seconds left in regulation. You were there on Saturday night in San Antonio to see the Cougs pull off one of the best comebacks and thrilling finishes we have ever seen in the Big Dance to win 70-67. In your time watching and following college basketball with your own 2 eyes, had you ever seen anything much like Saturday night?
No, Ben, and this was a where were you moment when you were watching this unfold. I think back, obviously, and you know that I'm not really one who's obviously prone to following other sports, but I remember in 1993 when Joe Carter hit that home run when the Blue Jays beat the Phillies. I remember in the 94 World Cup when Roberto Baggio missed that penalty kick. I remember, obviously, Christian Laettner making a shot in 92 to beat Duke. And I'll remember where I was on Saturday night and who I was with when Houston literally from the jaws of defeat went to the ecstasy of victory.
Matching the 3rd largest comeback ever in the history of the Final Four, trailing by 14 points in the second half. That was a stunning upset. So was Jon Rothstein mentioning Major League Baseball on National Championship Monday, but the guy can do it all. John, the first game of the night on Saturday, Florida down by 8 at the half against Auburn. They turned things around in the second 20 minutes. The Gators prevailing in the All-SEC showdown against their conference mate in Auburn. What did the Gators figure out in that second half to advance to a national championship game?
Well, the totality of Florida's front court wore down Johni Broome. And Ben, when we spoke last week, we talked about this being a real key to the game. The 4 guys that Florida used up front, Alex Condon, Tommy Hack, Ruben Chinyelu, and obviously Micah Handlogden, all wore down Broome. And those 4 guys are going to have to be up to the task tonight if we're going to see, indeed, Florida's front court trade wits with who, obviously, Houston has up front.
Yeah, and John, as we know from Florida players after the game and anybody kind of walking around the tunnels of the Alamo Dome on Saturday night, it wasn't exactly the nicest conversation at the break in the Gators locker room. Todd Golden inspiring his team for that second half. But Jon Rothstein, you're a college basketball truthsayer all season long. This was the national championship matchup that you predicted. Florida and Houston on a Monday night in early April for a national title at stake in San Antonio. So now we have reached this stage. It is a virtual pick'em between the Gators and the Cougars, the game you predicted. Who wins it on this Monday night?
Look, I think that Florida has the best guard on the court in Walter Clayton Jr., who has made more clutch shots in this NCAA tournament since any guard I've covered, since Shabazz Napier did it for UConn in 2014. But there's something about the Cougars. There's something about Kelvin Sampson. There's something about the culture in this program, and we saw that on Saturday night against Duke. And it feels like a coronation for Houston, but it's not a coronation for Houston, Ben, because Florida is that good. But with that said, Houston is playing just 199 miles from the Fertitta Center. I feel like there's going to be a major red feeling throughout San Antonio later today. And I feel like Kelvin Sampson, at 69 years of age, will have his life and his career complete by winning a national championship. And as of today, Ben, and this is something also that is very, I think, under the radar right now, Kelvin Sampson has 799 career wins. So if he gets the win tonight, it will be number 800. And what an 800 win it would be to beat Florida for the national championship here in San Antonio.
Coaching in his first ever national championship game, John, and those 799 wins right now in his career, second most among active D1 head coaches without a national championship, fifth most all time for a D1 head coach without a national title. Hoping to change that not only for his own individual resume, but the first national championship for a proud Houston basketball program tonight as well in the Lone Star State. John, that was your prediction as well. The Cougs, they have the edge against the Gators in this national championship game. What is that biggest advantage that Houston and Kelvin Sampson will look to take advantage of tonight?
Well, the one thing that I want to see is how Florida handles the relentlessness of Houston's depth up front. I think one of the areas where Florida had a decisive advantage against Auburn was Auburn had individually the best front court player on the floor Saturday in Janai Broome, but the totality of Florida's front court was able to wear down what we saw from obviously Broome. I don't think that's going to be the case against Houston up front with Tugler, with Roberts, and with Francis. So I think we're going to see a real prize fight tonight. Look, here's the bottom line. The more possessions there are in this game, the higher scoring the game is, it favors Florida. The more the game is in the mud, much like we saw towards the end of the Houston-Duke game on Saturday, the more it's going to favor the Cougars.
I think it's a great point, John. 140.5 is that total for tonight's national title game. You would think it is correlated. If Florida wins, it might be a higher scoring affair, over 140 and a hook. If Houston prevails, maybe staying under that number. Last question to you, Jon Rothstein. The Cougs cut down the nets as a national champ. Who wins the Final Four's most outstanding player?
LJ Cryer.
A plus 160 price right now. Second best number, only behind Walter Clayton Jr., but the shortest price for anybody wearing a Cougars uniform. Jon Rothstein, enjoy your national championship Monday in San Antonio. Have some good tortilla chips and salsa. Enjoy the sun. We thank you for everything this year throughout the college basketball campaign. I look forward to seeing you, Nat, my friend, coming up in May.
Ben, I'm saving my calories for when I, land at LaGuardia. Just so you know, I've got a reservation at Fort Charles in the West Village on Friday. So I'm excited about that. A cheat meal could be on the horizon along with some afternoon beverages on Tuesday. You're trying to get your early season rankings ready for late tonight, but they're changing not every hour, but every half hour with the transfer portal. We sleep in May, but make no mistake about it. Once I land in New York, we will drink in April.
It is National Championship Monday in college basketball, which means our coach, J.Y. James Young, joins us here for the entirety of this final half an hour of our second hour on a Monday morning on the early line. We'll recap National Championship Sunday in the women's NCAA tournament, and then, of course, break down every aspect of our national title game on this Monday night. JY, we will be live together on this Monday evening in studio, along with our good friend, old K-Dubs, Kevin Walsh, for the entirety of the national championship game. Excited for all of it on this Monday to close out a college basketball season.
I know you had Jon Rothstein on. He says we'll sleep in May. I'm hoping to sleep in April. I got to get through one more night.
You certainly do, at least maybe early on April 8th. That would be a Tuesday morning with an 8:59 p.m. Eastern time, whatever the tip is now, for our national championship game. Donnie will be up the entire time.
Yeah.
Do not worry
you want a good
about
story?
it. Yeah, go ahead.
You want to go? Yeah, here's a good story for you, JY, tomorrow. Like, me and Ben will be in studio together. Ben is going to explain to me how good the game was last night live on TV tomorrow morning, because I won't see one single play tonight from the national championship. But I do that out of love and respect for the people out there. I got to be bright and early and bushy-tailed. I won't watch the game. Ben will explain it to me, and away we go. Can't wait. Can't wait.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, that's going to be a good time. It's basically going to be our 3 hours. I'm just going to do play-by-play of a recap version of the game, as we can't give play-by-play tonight on Bracket Central. All right, JY, let's dive into what we saw yesterday in the Women's National Championship game. And for the first time since 2016, but the 12th time in program history, UConn back on top of the sport. National Championship victory number 12. As the Huskies thoroughly dominant against the reigning national title winners in South Carolina, 82-59. A 23-point win. Connecticut covers as a 7.5-point favorite. A total of 136.5. Skies to the over. JY, after making Final Four history earlier in the weekend on Friday, winning by 34 against UCLA, largest margin of victory ever in a women's Final Four game, they knock off the reigning champs in South Carolina by 23. How was UConn able to be so dominant throughout this big dance, resulting in national championship number 12?
Honestly, they just had to figure it out. I know they had some earlier losses, including a home one to USC, which I do believe may have been the last loss that they had in a regular season, but I was undeterred. I thought that this team was the best team in the country, and you had to figure it out. You have to realize the fact of the injuries that Paige Beckers has had over the career, the fact that AZ Fudd missed last year, Chen transfers in from Princeton, has got to figure that out, right? And Sarah Strong is a freshman. You just had to kind of get them all kind of figuring it out offensively. And I think what you saw, Ben, was a team that was all on all cylinders. Now, the thing with the biggest takeaway for me was it wasn't Sunday, it was Friday. And AZ Fudd showed up Friday night versus UCLA. And once I saw that, Ben, there was no doubt in my mind that they were going to get the win. Remember, they went to South Carolina earlier in the year, broke their home winning streak, and beat them by 30. So I wasn't shocked. Now, I was shocked about how bad the score was, but I wasn't shocked by the win and the cover by UConn, because once AZ gets going, especially and she wasn't even going from three, pull-up game, get to the rack, whatever you need. Now, Paige doesn't have to carry all of it. Chen can become a little bit more of a point guard, and Sarah Strong could be the best freshman in the country. So once you got those three going, there was nothing that South Carolina could do to stop them, nor does South Carolina have the offensive firepower to go against that. Once that game started getting up in numbers, you saw Dawn at about 53-39. You see all on social media going nuclear on the sideline. Honestly, Ben, when that happened, you knew that game was over.
We take a look at UConn as a program. Gino Auriemma, 12 national championships now, and you saw him getting like emotional at the end, saying, "This is one of the teams where, like, I'm sad to say goodbye to them. I'm happy they won it, but how much they meant to me here." How much longer of a run do we have with Gino Auriemma with UConn? Because he is the program, and that's an interesting transition. But are we looking at this too early, or do you have a couple more years left in the tank?
You know, you can go both ways. I for one thing, in that you win by 30, you go out on top. I mean, there hasn't been a dominating performance like that at a national championship game. I can't remember. I mean, I think back to UNLV in '89 when he won by 30 in Denver against Duke, but that was a beatdown of epic proportion. Both games. You look at Paige Beckers, arguably one of his most favorite players. Well, at least according to Paige, she is one of Gino's favorite players of all time. It's figuring out that's when you go out on top. I talked to a couple different coaches like last night. One said, "Wouldn't be surprised." A good friend says, the point I keep forgetting is, well, you do have Sarah Strong for 3 more years, so you do have a big-time player to go with, but the recruiting class isn't what it has been in the past, so maybe that's another mind. Really quick to South Carolina, guys, because I feel like this needs to be addressed. Ben is going to go exactly where I'm going. Something is going on with Malaysia Fawali. I don't know what it is. She is the best guard on that team. You saw Gillette Law and other assistants pleading to Dawn to get this girl in the game. You have Johnson, and Papal go about 3 for 19 from the floor. And the only kid that can get you a bucket is sitting on the bench in critical moments. Not just this game. They started out slow against Texas. What happened then? Who was on the bench? That's right, Malaysia Fuwali. She gets in the game. She gets a couple of buckets. Now she goes back to the bench. Something's going on. And the same friend that told me that don't be surprised Gina leaves also said don't be surprised if Fuwali ends up in the portal. Something's going on in South Carolina that we don't know about.
One of the best guards in the country. In her 2 years in Columbia, Malaysia Fuwali has largely come off the bench. For South Carolina, a very deep team. Don Staley really ran it 10 deep this year for the Gamecocks, but that would be interesting. As we define legacy, of course, no more successful coach in D1 college basketball, men's or women's, when it comes to winning national championships than Gino Auriemma. And now with 1,250 career wins, that also the most in the sport as well. But in terms of a legacy for Paige Bueckers, JY, you mentioned it earlier, missed the entirety of the 2022-23 season with a knee injury, returned last year to lead Connecticut back to a Final Four. This year, a national championship game and the first national title since 2016. When we think back on Paige Bueckers, one of the all-time greats at UConn, one of the all-time greats in women's college basketball, how does her legacy change with a national championship yesterday?
It changes everything, right? Because you've heard some of the old guard, the Tarazis, the Birds say, even when the knock on Caitlin Clark was, she didn't win a national title, which is actually hogwash. But now she's got her national title on Paige Bueckers. And it brings up an interesting point, Ben, that I'm going to ask you, because you watch as much basketball as I do, and so does Donnie. I don't even know, this is crazy to say, I don't even know she's on Mount Rushmore for UConn. But you figure Maya Moore, you figure Sue Bird, you figure Tarazi. Who's the fourth? Is it her? Is it Lobo? Is it Rosati? Is it Tina Charles? I mean, is it Stewie? There's so many. They need a Mount Rushmore of like 10 players on it. But her legacy is one that came out with a lot of fanfare. I remember seeing her play for the Minnesota Metro Stars in AAU back when I was at Monmouth. Thoroughly impressed with her game. She has lived up to the goods. She's going to go into the WNBA, and her legacy will continue as she tries to forge a new path, starting with the WNBA draft, which I do believe is tomorrow.
Tomorrow is the WNBA draft?
Oh, sorry, somewhat in the next week. I know. I think today is where you have the deadline to.
Make
But I
it
know
tomorrow,
the draft is
why not?
coming up. Maybe I'm
on
off
a
by a
sec.
couple days. You have to
Because
look this up.
Paige Bueckers is going to be the number one overall pick in the WNBA draft. I'm trying to find, a week from today, April 14th. Who holds that number one pick?
Dallas.
The Dallas.
Got to get
that was the
it. Got to
question.
get it to Indiana. Got to get it to Indiana.
I know. That was the question really quick was she doesn't want to go to Dallas. She wanted LA. That's why I think there was a little bit of weight of her going pro.
Oh, interesting. All right. Well, now we get ready for the national championship on this Monday. Next. National Championship Monday in San Antonio. Our scouting report with the coach, JY James Young. Before we dive deep into tonight's matchup, where the coach thinks there are advantages and edges to be had, we look back one final time on a sensational Final Four Saturday inside the Alamo Dome. Donnie and myself live for the opening game of 2 that night. Florida and Auburn, the coach, JY, alongside Kevin Walsh for the nightcap between Duke and Houston in one of the great Final Four games we have seen in history. Of course, one of the most memorable finishes the sport has ever seen. JY, as you and K-Dubs are sitting there on the desk, watching a Houston team trail by 14 with 8:17 remaining, watching a Houston team trail by 9 with just over 2 minutes to go, watching a Houston team trail by 6 with just about 35 seconds left in regulation. But they keep finding their way back in closer and sticking around. What were some of the initial thoughts in your mind?
Honestly, Ben, the first thought in my mind happened in the first half when Houston was 3 of 15, 3 of 16 for the floor and couldn't buy a bucket. And I said to Kevin, they need to get this lead to 6 by halftime. And if you remember, they went 3, 3, 3. I think it was Cryer, Uzan, back to back to back. That got the lead to 6. And I said, okay, if you're Kelvin Sampson, you're walking into the room and saying, we were god awful and we're down 6. Stay the course. Stay the course. Something will break. But then when Cooper Flagg hit that wing three to make it 64-55, we all thought it was game over. But something interesting happened with Duke. Duke got more worried about bleeding clock than running offense. And it allowed Houston to get back into it. You also saw Cooper Flagg look completely cooked. I mean, this guy was walking up the floor sometimes on offense, and that 5 minutes and 19 seconds of average mile that the Houston Cougars run, you saw it. There were so many pivotal plays, but the main thing I took out of it, Ben, is that game by Houston was not won on Saturday night. It was won in September, in the preseason, with the practices, with the constant chaos that Kelvin Sampson does. It was won in playing close games after close games, losing 3 games in overtime. Duke, when the moment got big, Ben, they didn't know what to do on either side of the ball, and it's almost like as the game got closer, you saw Houston almost pick themselves up, knowing that they had a chance to steal the game.
Keep fighting all the way through to the end. Another comeback kid story. They're the Florida Gators, multiple times now coming back in the past couple games against elite competition. What happened in this game, Coach? 46-38. Auburn did whatever they wanted to on offense against the Florida Gators. Second half, 27 points. What were the changes you saw in the second half which allowed Florida to come back and win that basketball game?
Well, I talked about it on Betting Above the Rim earlier in the day, is the fact of you have 3 bigs that you're going to run at Janai Broome. And if Janai Broome was going to break down, I remember, Donnie, you were, and I talked about it with you guys last week, 23-8 last, against Michigan State. When Janai Broome couldn't score on the bench, they were in trouble. And that's exactly what happened. Janai Broome, fast start, 12 points first half, 3 points in the second half. And there was a critical moment, I think it was about 3 minutes left to go. He got the ball, he lowered his right shoulder, Condon took it square in the chest, took the charge, and Donnie, I don't know if Janai Broome got the ball ever again. Like they didn't know what to do. They started bombing away, and it looked undisciplined. Florida relied on their depth. They relied on all of their personnel. Elijah Martin with some filthy dunks in transition. I mean, one of them looked like Air Jordan the way he took it. I'm like, no, too far, too gone. Yeah, that's fine. He got it. But to me, that was the key. And then obviously, Walter Clayton Jr., Lord have mercy. I mean, Kevin's going to take all credit teaching him how to shoot coming from Iona. We all know that's not the truth. But Walter Clayton Jr. was putting on big shot after big shot. And to me, which was stunning is, especially late in the game, I would have doubled him all over the floor. He touches the ball, I'm running a second defender at him, and I'm telling him, let someone else beat me. Because basically, Walter Clayton did it a lot on his own.
34 points, 5 of 8 from beyond the arc. Walter Clayton Jr., the first player in the men's NCAA tournament since Larry Bird in 1979 to score at least 30 points in back-to-back games in the Elite Eight and the Final Four, the 2 most significant stages of a season at that point. But now it's a national championship game for Walter Clayton Jr., his Florida Gators, taking on the Houston Cougars. JY, after one of the best Final Four Saturday nights we have seen in totality in recent memory. It sets the stage for a Monday night inside the Alamo Dome for a national championship game. It is basically a pick'em. Florida, an ever so slight favorite. Total is 140.5. Where do you begin your breakdown for tonight's national title tilt?
Honestly, with the referees. We have to see how this game's going to be officiated. I don't think people understand. Like, Houston was able to be physical on the ball with Duke in the second half. Rarely call for fouls. Do the referees stay out of the way and let this game be decided by the players? If that does, that leans in Houston's favor because of their physicality defensively. If they let this game get to the foul line, up and down, you may see Houston get into foul trouble. That's where the trouble lies. I've been on Houston since day one, even when it wasn't a value play, even though I thought in my mind it was a value play, but it wasn't a value play. I'm going to stay with Houston, Ben, because I look at that team and that togetherness and their ability to defend and the ability to have 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 elite guards that can make shots. You saw Kelvin Sampson smartly go to Emmanuel Sharp on the ball. Look for him to find the mismatch at the guard spot and exploit it. I like Houston on the money line to get the win.
We're going to try to find those advantages in terms of how these two teams match up. The tail of the tape between two college basketball programs that this season have won 35 games. In total, Florida has already won 2 national championships, hoping for number 3 in program history tonight. Houston hoping for its first ever, in Kelvin Sampson seeking his first as a head coach as well. Plenty more with our coach next. Live right here on this National Championship Monday to round out our second hour with the coach, James Young, JY. JY, when we look at the total for tonight's national title game between Houston and Florida, you really could make an argument it is rather correlated. It's 140.5. Knowing how these two teams want to match up. If Florida, the slight money line favorite by just 7 cents, is to be crowned a national champ tonight, does this total push to an over? If Houston wins their first ever national championship in program history, does this game stay under, courtesy of the nation's most efficient defense? What do you think the total means for the result of tonight's national title game?
It's very simple, and you said it. If you think Houston's winning it, you're parlaying Houston in the under. If you think Florida's winning it, you're parlaying Florida in the over. Because I think, like I said, it comes down to, number one, the referees. If the referees start calling this game extremely tight and you get to the foul line, that's going to be 3 points for Florida, and you're going to probably see guys like Jon Roberts or others get into foul trouble. But if the game stays under, it's a Houston win because they were able to dictate tempo and pace. And I think that's the interesting thing is it's going to be a battle of wills. And that's why you even look at the team totals, they're right at 70.5. The money is coming basically right down the middle. This was a hypothetical line, if I'm not mistaken, from as soon as the Final Four was set. And it hasn't moved in a week. So that tells you how even this game is down the middle. To me, it's going to be about Houston's playing defensively. That game looked like it was going to go over on Saturday. Houston put that thing to a screeching halt. I still think it's going under 140.5, which tells you who I think is going to win the game.
We take a look at these two teams. Obviously, 2 superstar players on both sides. Walter Clayton Jr. is going to take Florida as far as they can. That means one more game to a championship. LJ Cryer as well for Houston. If we remove those 2 players, Coach, from the equation, any secondary players that we might be looking at, because Alex Condon, 4 straight games for the Florida Gators, milk carton box out here on offense. Who needs to step up for either one of these 2 programs outside of their superstars?
Well, if you guys could pull back up those odds to win MOP, to me, you're going to think I'm crazy. I think it's Elijah Martin at 29-1. Because if this game gets out in transition a little bit, that's when he can excel. He's had experience in the Final Four, maybe a couple of steals and dunks, maybe guards LJ Cryer. That's where I would look at there. If you look at Houston, I said it, a.k.a. Manny Sharp, a.k.a. Manny Fresh. Manuel Sharp is going to be the one that's going to hit big shots. If you think about it, he was ice cold again. Well, who had 2 of the more pivotal plays on Saturday? The Emmanuel Sharp 3 and then the Emmanuel Sharp steal, which I still don't know why Wilson dribbled out to the 3-point line and shot it, but I digress. They still got the offensive putback. That's okay. So to me, it's Emmanuel Sharp, Manny Fresh for Houston, and Elijah Martin at 29-1 for Florida.
I do think there is some value in both of those numbers. More than likely, if Florida wins the national championship, Walter Clayton Jr., after what he did in the Final Four with 34, he's probably going to go home with the MOP hardware. LJ Cryer, the shortest price for Houston, but a lot of value with the Cougs. You highlighted Emmanuel Sharp, his matchups tonight against the Gators defense. JY, we know there is going to be a ton of physicality on display in this national championship game between the Gators and the Cougs. From a coaching perspective, what do you think either coach, Todd Golden for his Gators, Kelvin Sampson for his Cougs, is reminding their team in preparation on this Monday for how the game flow is going to look tonight?
It's going to be physical. If I'm Todd Golden, I'm telling my team I'm one of the biggest and best offensive rebounding teams in the country. Houston is not going to want to get in transition. We must own the boards. We must attack the boards with our bigs to try and get Tugler, Francis, and Roberts in foul trouble. If you're Houston, stay the course, run your offense. You did see at times Cryer and Uzan try to do too much offensively. Let the game come to you. Couple of props I like. I don't think there's any way in hell Kelvin Sampson lets Walter Clayton Jr. get to 20 points. I look at him to go under. And the junkyard dog is going to have an impact. Jon Roberts to go over his rebounding prop tonight. He is someone that's critical to this game. He offensive rebounded the ball well in the first game. He is going to try and use his toughness and his physicality to attack the boards.
He brought it on Saturday night, no doubt. 11 points, 12 boards, 5 dimes, 2 steals, and a block for Jon Roberts. He is one of the leaders of this Houston program. The Cougs hoping for that first ever national championship. Florida, the ever so slight favorite to cut down the nets. JY, a fadeaway to the break, but we'll see you tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern time on Bracket Central. Hour 3 for us. Welcome to hour number 3, our third and final on this Monday, but not just any ordinary Monday to start off a new week on the early line. It is National Championship Monday in college basketball. Tonight in San Antonio, it's Houston. It's Florida, a matchup, of course, of 2 number 1 seeds looking for a national championship to cut down the nets, to climb a ladder and be atop the pinnacle of this sport. We will continue to break down our national championship game throughout the entirety of this third and final hour. We'll dive deep into the props as well here before we end out our show. Our guy, TV Tom Vecchia, with us up next to go not only into a national championship game, but Alexander Ovechkin's march to history that was capped off yesterday with goal number 895. And we'll talk a little MLB with one of the 2 hosts, alongside his co-host, of Pro Baseball Today, that being TV and DRS. But to start this third hour, we've got to hear from the people, Donnie. A lot to get to in this third and final hour on National Championship Monday.
On a championship Monday, and again, not really a lot of talk just yet here on the Masters. It's a great week. It's one of those weeks that I look at, Ben, where you say to yourself, like, we understand Major League Baseball usually means the unofficial start to the spring season. But you know where you actually see it? Not on your TV. Like, it was cold in Philadelphia yesterday in a big series against the Dodgers. But we can get those blue skies down at Augusta, Georgia, the azaleas in full bloom. It's like now we've made it this point. We just need the Northeast to get a little bit warmer and also have that sun peek out up here. So it's a great week. It's a championship game tonight. We say goodbye to another season. And by the way, like, we do this at every end of the season. Like, where did the college basketball season go? It's crazy. Like, it starts like October and November and December all the way through. And now we're finally here on the final day, and not forgetting of how much fun the last month has been, particularly with conference tournament week leading into Selection Sunday and then the tournament itself. It's a shame. But before you know it, we'll be talking to Duke Blue Devils and the Kentucky Wildcats next October as well with another season. Just amazing how fast these seasons actually go.
Even for DRS, whose college basketball season really starts in February and comes to a close tonight, it can really fly by. Donnie, there will be so many things to break down for us tomorrow at the conclusion of this college basketball season. Looking forward to the next campaign. The national championship odds for this year, or for next year at this time in 2026, are already out. So much is going to change, though. The transfer portal is about to be bonkers. It has already been bonkers, but Duke and Houston right now, the early front runners to win a national championship next year. And those were the 2 teams, of course, that gave us one of the all-time great Final Four matchups on Saturday night. But how about this national championship game? It's Florida. It's Houston. It's a virtual pick'em with a total of 140.5. What is the best bet with a title at stake? The question to all of you in Fade the Public. At SportsGrid on Twitter, what is the best bet for tonight's national championship game? Is it Florida as the ever so slight favorite, 1.5 in the spread, -113, the updated number on the money line? Is it Houston, the ever so slight underdog, -106 money line, getting 1.5? Or is it correlated in that total? Our over-under currently stands at 140 and a hook. Opened at 141.5 late on Saturday night, or I guess early on Sunday morning. Already down by a point, 140.5. The over, the under. Most of the public DRS, I don't know if most is the right word, a slight edge in the public votes for Florida at 39%. Houston, though, not trailing far behind at 35%. The under getting more love than the over, which I find very interesting because the public loves an over, especially in the final game of a college basketball campaign, and most of the public on the under. Noted.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not surprised actually where we're going, but I think the most surprising thing is that the over is only 8.8%. Usually to get anywhere around a 50-50 split with an over and under is an amazing feat. And now you take a look at the over coming in at 8.7%, which is kind of interesting. But I do think we are at a true coin flip for this game, just depending on which side that you like. Obviously, Florida and or Houston. For me, I voted Houston the +1.5 in this game, but I don't think I'm going to actually have a side wager per se. I am more interested, and we'll get to some of those player props and maybe even a total look, because I do think the under is the right play 10 around 140.5, because I do think the slower start might actually come into play. But for me, I'm not surprised. Like in a 1.5 point spread, we don't have an overwhelming favorite here on this poll, with Florida at 39% at -1.5, getting the total of the vote right now. But Houston, certainly, we're the opponent. It's just a matter of what you're thinking out of Houston. Very good basketball team. Did they get lucky to beat Duke? It doesn't matter. It has no impact on the game or the matchup tonight. And also, can Florida and Walter Clayton just say, you know what? I'm just better than everybody on the basketball court. I'm going to win another game for my squad here. It's a fun game to break down. It's a fun match that we had, and I'm glad that it's 1.5 points, because we're not looking at, hey, 9 or 10 points, Ben. Should be a blowout. Not tonight. We're looking at going either way, and I like that.
And Donnie, this was the hope, right? As we got ready for this weekend in San Antonio with 4 of the best basketball teams we have seen in college hoops in the last 25 plus years. We have shared this stat so many times, but all 4 of our 1 seeds had a pre-NCAA tournament Ken Palm net rating of +35 or better. 3 total teams in the previous 20 NCAA tournaments had a +35 net rating or better, according to Ken Palm. We were hoping for this, because this tournament hasn't had that Cinderella. It hasn't had many magical March moments. A couple, the Derek Queen buzzer beater, of course, for Maryland in the round of 32. That dramatic comeback for Texas Tech in the Sweet 16 against Arkansas. And then Florida to Texas Tech in the Elite 8. And then what we got on Saturday, both with Florida's second half rally and the All-SEC showdown against Auburn, and of course, matching the 3rd largest comeback ever in Final Four history, and how the Cougars did it, stunning Duke down the stretch, including in the final 35 seconds, as good of a Final Four as we can remember in recent memory. But a tournament oftentimes is only as good as its lasting memory, and that is a national championship game. And this is what we want. We will have a 1 seed win a national championship. That, of course, DRS will be the 5th time in the last 6 years, the 26th time in the 40 NCAA tournaments since the field expanded to 64 in 1985. Our 14th 1 seed to win a national championship in the last 18 seasons. If Houston wins, however, tonight, and they're an ever so slight underdog, moneyline has adjusted, now -114 for Florida, -105 on the other side for the Cougs. If Houston wins tonight, they will be the first national champion in 21 seasons to win said national championship without being ranked inside the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll, dating back to Syracuse in 2003. That would be an interesting trend. Florida was in the top 12 of the Week 6 AP poll. But as we look at this game, Donnie, and as the public is sharing, it is really too close to call. We have 9 cents of difference on the money line and a total of 140 and a hook. This game should live up to its billing, and I really hope it matches the expectation we have set for it on this Monday night in San Antonio.
Should get a good one. Hopefully it's just a clean game all the way through. Close game at the half, close game down the stretch. That's what most fans are rooting for outside of your betting interest. But also understand this. The FanDuel Sportsbook open that line at Florida at -1.5, still sits at -1.5. Other outlets have moved that line to -1. You take a look at the totals there, the 141.5s here, now down to 140.5 live at the FanDuel Sportsbook. Still 141.5s out there in the atmosphere. I want to see where this line closes at. Would anybody be surprised if this game goes to a de facto pick'em by game time? I don't think so at this point. But it's clear right now that Florida does have a little bit more of that jump. Is Florida the better overall team per se? Probably so. But again, are we going to doubt? Like, Duke was the immovable object that got moved there in the craziest fashion on Saturday night. Do we have enough energy left in the tank for the Houston Cougars and Kelvin Sampson? We'll find that play out. But I just love the fact that we're entering into a game that is a de facto coin flip with the odds makers. Yeah. That sets us up for some pretty good fun tonight.
Yeah, it certainly does. And I really hope it lives up to it. I expect that to be the case. Back to our national championship previews a little bit later on.
But you know, it's going to be a lot of fun to watch tonight. A game in national college basketball between the Florida Gators and the Houston Cougars. Understand this. Opening lines here, once we saw this, Tom, -1.5. Still sitting at 1.5 here at the FanDuel Sportsbook. A total of 140.5. Your initial thoughts on this game when that line hit? And also, where do you think this line might be by the time we get to game time tonight?
Yeah, you guys were just touching on the last segment. I think here's the real answer. If anyone out there reads anything today, hears anything today, and you hear someone say like they know how this game is going to end up, they're lying. Right, this game is as pure of a coin flip as we've ever seen. It is one. Donnie, you said it could end up being a pick'em. 140 may drop to 139. This game's a toss-up, but that's honestly great. Like, we don't want to see an 8-point spread in the national championship. We want to see a game where either team deserves to win, either team can win, and it's honestly gonna come down to like who performs, who has the ball last second, and that's what we should be. So I'm on the under first half. Under 65.5, I think that's the spot to go. A little bit of feeling out. I wouldn't be surprised to see if there's some real value in taking live overs in the game once the teams get settled in. I'm not really worried about the sight lines, which is something a lot of people talked about in the Final Four, which is a concern, but the players have been there. Like, they've kind of adjusted to that. Obviously, it's not the same court and the same backdrop, all those sorts of things. But first half under, just because a little bit nerves, whatever it might be. But second half over, live overs is the spot I'm going to be looking.
So, yeah, there will be that filling out process between these two teams. There is no doubt. And a lot of physicality expected early, often, and throughout in this national championship game. Vecchio, the total for the game is 140.5. Even if you're on the first half under, but you expect more scoring in the second half, do you correlate that total to who ends up cutting down the nets as a national champion tonight in San Antonio?
Yeah, I think you have to have your side, right? And if you got to be on, Houston, you got to be on them full game, first half, whatever it might be. I will say a part of me thinks that if Florida falls behind in the first half, there's going to be a lot of value. And it's not going to be like some hot take. Like, people are going to be rushing to bet Florida in the second half if they do fall behind, just because their offense is so good. Now, the question is how long can, like, Houston withstand that storm? Like, their defense is awesome, but at a certain point, will the offense from the Gators break through? So a second half spread for Florida could be very enticing.
Tom, we were talking to the coach a little bit earlier in the show, and we're saying to ourselves, like, hey, there's some other players to take a look at here, like Walter Clayton Jr., we know is great, Cryer on the opposite side here for Houston. But how about this, Alex Condon, who Ben and I have been having a focus on a couple games here, saying, you know what, I wonder if this guy can provide. He doesn't even look to take shots at this point, Tom. So most people look towards overs in the tournament and betting games. Looks like maybe an under on the forecast here for the big guy.
Yeah, I'm going with under on 8.5 points. Like, it's a little bit juiced at -130, but when push comes to shove, like, where's the offense going to be going for the Gators? It's going to be Clayton, Martin, and Howell, like, kind of in that order. And he's just not seeing the volume of attempts, maybe some foul issues as well. This points to an under for me.
Yeah, it really does. Of course, Alex Condon scoring only 1 point on Saturday in the Final Four, despite myself having an over 10.5 points prop bet on Condon. He has only scored in double figures once for the Gators in this tournament, back in the round of 64 opener. And of course, some of the points props are slightly depressed for everybody on the Gators because they are playing the nation's most efficient defense, that being the Houston Cougars. Vecchio, before we get to a national championship game tonight, or just elsewhere outside of college basketball, as we get ready for a new week in MLB, what's the play on this Monday on the Diamond?
Yeah, let's go to the Dodgers, and let's go to Dustin May, who looked pretty good in his first start. He obviously did not pitch last year. Let's go over 4.5 strikeouts, sitting at -128, going up against the Nats today to start the season. Small sample size. Nationals, they have a 25.3% strikeout rate versus right-handed pitching. That's in the bottom 10 in the league. Dustin May, again, didn't pitch last year, but in his first start, 81 pitches, 6 strikeouts. 5 innings pitched. I think this is a spot where we're going to see this line move up to 5.5. I have seen it in 5.5 at other books, but 4.5 minus 128. I would probably play it to about minus 140, and that's the spot I really like. Also, I have some hit parlays coming up, which I will of course be tweeting out. We hit on some of those yesterday.
Heck yeah, Vecchio, we appreciate that. The Dodgers on the road in the nation's capital against those Nationals after dropping 2 of 3 against Donnie's Phils this weekend. Still a 9-2 start to the campaign for the Dodgers. And Dustin May, in his return in more than a year, looked pretty good for LA in his season debut. TV, Tom Vecchio, the prop perspective on that Monday. Tom, as always, we appreciate the time. Thanks for being here.
Of course, thanks for having me.
More from the national championship game comes way up next. For the next 25 plus minutes, you can consider this your national championship home for every best bet, breakdown, and preview of tonight's title game inside the Alamo Dome between Florida and Houston. We are on this national championship Monday, early on the SportsGrid network on the early line. Let's continue to dive deep and give you every angle of this game. DRS, where it stands right now, virtually a pick'em. Florida, an ever so slight favorite, 1.5 in the spread, minus 114 on the money line, a total of 140.5. Houston on the other side, an ever so slight dog, minus 105. We're talking 9 cents of difference. Donnie, let's start there with how this game is going to look tonight in San Antonio. When all is said and done, and a team is getting ready to climb a ladder to cut down the nets, will this game be as close, decided by this tight of margin, as the odds makers expect?
Yeah, granted, we're not going to predict a 1-point game here, try to nail that
Right.
either way on who wins, but the expectations are close. And the reason being is Houston tends to play those lower scoring games because of their tempo overall. We know Florida wants to play at a much higher tempo than Houston does. It'll be interesting who dictates it, but I don't think that if Florida gets out and running as if like Houston just can't comprehend what's going on. Houston has had some games that had some elevated scoring, and they were fine in those basketball games. But when you're taking a look at coming down to the end, it just... Sometimes if you have one team that runs fast, the other team that runs fast, one team doesn't play all that well, but you still have that high tempo, that's where you get the 10, 15, and 20-point victories. But the way Houston plays, like if Houston gets up 10 points, let's just say with 10 minutes to go in the game, they're probably going to do something similar to like Duke did. But again, Duke's not used to slowing the game down at an ultra-slow tempo like Houston does, where they're just playing their game, which means limited possessions, make a couple stops here and there, you're right back into it. Houston with a 10-point lead isn't looked at taking it to 20 points there with their offense. Houston's 10-point lead is going like, we'll win this game by 10 with 8 minutes to go because we'll just play great defense and take our advantage shots when we get those here. So I think we're envisioning, I would put it this way, surprised to see a 10-point plus victory tonight. Absolutely.
Yeah. Absolutely so. And Donnie, I do think that if either team, I was going to say, both of these teams have been incredibly tremendous about coming back from deficits throughout the NCAA tournament. I was going to say if there's a 10-plus point margin at any point, it's difficult for both of these teams against their opponent tonight inside the Alamo Dome to construct a comeback. If you're playing against Houston, they are so sound, they are so slow, it's going to be hard to kind of carve into that margin. We've seen Florida do that throughout this NCAA tournament as well. And I was going to say, if the Cougs start trailing by double digits, they're not exactly built to play at an up-tempo pace, to score bucket after bucket after bucket, to start a comeback. And yet they held Duke to one made field goal in the final 10.5 minutes of regulation and matched the third largest comeback ever in Final Four history. So maybe we toss that idea out the window, but of course, at least based on what we expect pregame, difficult to be down by 12 and try to make this game a competitive contest. Of course, everybody wants to stay close. And I think that will be really important for Florida. Donnie, you mentioned Duke's tempo. They actually play a little bit slower, certainly in the half court. They want you to play slow when they are defending you on that side of the floor. And their tempo around 268, 269 at a 364 for a good majority of the season. Florida's top 60. Florida wants to play with pace. Florida had started the NCAA tournament with 4 straight overs, 11 consecutive overs, including those first 4 games in the Big Dance. Very opposite of what Houston wants to do, the 5th slowest team in all of college hoops. How much do you think that tempo battle will dictate our outcome tonight in San Antonio?
I mean, I don't know how much it will because I don't expect a high running game because that's why we don't have 155.5. It's still a decent total. Like if you probably took, Ben, like during the average of the regular season in college basketball, what's an average total? It's probably 140, right? 130 is a slower
I'd say
tempo,
that's very fair.
120 is really slow, 155 real fast. So 140 is probably the average here. But I do think it plays into Houston just a little bit more because, as I said, it's not one of those teams where it's Virginia per se, like, oh my goodness. If Virginia's down 7 points with 7 minutes to go, they might not have 2 possessions left because of how slow they like to have tempo. Like Houston can engage. Like they're not built on, we have 2 7'1" giants on the low block. That's why we're slow up and down the court. They have athletic guards. They just choose to play at that tempo because it fits their defensive footprint and they capitalize on mistakes from the other basketball team. So for me, the dictating of either style, I don't really think it comes into play. Like, yes, we know Houston wants to move faster than Houston, but I don't think this is an impose your will type of game because I think both of these teams can play either style, to be honest.
It's a really good point, DRS. I'm not sure if this game gets up a little bit in terms of at least pace, if that means Houston can't keep up with Florida. And if the game is slow, the Gators efficient enough on the offensive end, second most efficient offense at this point, to still find some quality possessions. Plenty more as we get ready for tonight in San Antonio. Next, we continue to preview tonight's national championship game, our final college basketball contest of this season. He is Donnie Rightside. I am Ben Stevens. Of course, it is a matchup of 1 seeds tonight with a championship on the line. It is Florida. It is Houston. It is a 1.5 spread. It is 9 cents of difference on the money line, and it's a total of 140 and a hook. Donnie, as we have looked at game flow, both you and I expect this game to be close. A single-digit margin, more than likely. Will it be decided by a point? Probably not. A single-digit margin, I think that is pretty fair. Either team can play the either style. However, Houston wants to be slower. Florida wants to play a little bit at a faster tempo. Let's talk total now. Donnie, as you look at this game, if you were to bet it, if you were to pick a team to cut down the nets, what would that then mean for your thought on the total?
I think the total stays under, regardless of who wins the game tonight. And I know the easy correlation, once again, and I'm not going to, get angry at anybody who says, like, okay, if Houston wins, it's probably under. If Florida wins, it's probably over. I think it's staying under regardless of who wins this basketball game, and it will get tense, close, and tight. Because why? We don't have that. Oh, my goodness. Yes, we know both of the offenses are very good, but the defenses are good. The defenses do some things that are going to frustrate other teams. So for my money tonight, I don't look at it and say, like, well, Florida's going to win. That means they got 74 points. They're going to hit their team total to the over, and away they go with the over for the game. So for me, no correlation point. I think the game stays under regardless of who wins it here. So I don't have it. Because honestly, you would say Houston wants this game to be slower. Technically, yes, but they have the ability to score 75 points in this game. Like, that's not holding them back, even though Florida's a very good defensive team.
Donnie, we've talked about this Houston team for a long time. Kelvin Sampson has led the Cougs in his 11 years to 7 consecutive NCAA tournament appearances. They have reached the Sweet 16 each of the last 6 years. So let's look at that longest active Sweet 16 streak now and in this 6-year window. Every year, Houston has been a top 5 defense. No surprise, they're the most efficient defense this year nationally in college hoops. But in all of the 6 years that we have seen, Houston has been a top 15 efficient offense. Now, that might cause some people a little bit of surprise. Efficiency on the offensive end, even if you are playing slow, just means getting quality looks, having good possessions, and, of course, scoring the basketball. So what is the one big difference from this year's Cougs team to the previous 5 seasons? The 3-ball. Houston never ranked inside the top 100 in the country in terms of three-point percentage as a team. This year, in entering tonight, they are the best. Nearly 40% from 3, shot better than 45% from 3 in the Saturday night win in the Final Four against Duke. That is the main distinction from this year's Houston team to the previous teams that have looked a lot like this Cougars team in construction to what we will see on display on a Monday night in the national championship. How about to Florida on the other end? What Todd Golden has done in his 3 years in Gainesville is build a team that in the backcourt, you have some of the best guards that you could hope for. The athleticism of Elijah Martin. Will Richard, the consistency, and of course, probably no more prolific scorer right now in college hoops than that of Walter Clayton Jr. But you also have the physicality up front for Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyelu. You've got Thomas Houck off the bench, Denzel Aberdeen, Micah Hand logged in. You've got so much depth for this Gators side as well. These two teams match up so well. I'm not sure, Donnie, you could look 1 through 5 in the starting lineup. You could look even with the bench and the reserves in play and say, ooh, there it is. Red flag, red flag. That's why insert X team has a monumental edge and is going to win this national championship game tonight. I just do not believe that advantage exists between these two teams.
No, it doesn't. There are some incremental advantages I think both of these teams want to take advantage of. Like if you look at Houston's offense, again, the calling card has always been for the Cougars. They're going to be real scrappy. They're going to play unbelievable defense. They'll get their points where they can. Top 9 in the country in efficiency. That is tremendous. Now, granted, they don't turn the basketball over. They rebound extremely well on offense. And as you said, the best three-point shooting team in the entire country. They don't shoot the three-point shot with a ton of volume, but that's okay. Knock down the open three-point shot makes their offense go. Here's some of the issues that you might run into tonight if you're looking at Houston's offense, because as we said, Florida's defense, top 10 in the country in efficiency. It's really good. If the three ball isn't going down, you look for other ways to score, Ben, which means stealing points at the free throw line. They don't do that. 327th in the country at getting to the free throw line. If you look at their point distribution, Ben, 312th in the country at scoring from the free throw line. So if you're in a game that's going to be close, you want to be able to steal those points, specifically against another good defensive team. On the flip side, you take a look at the Florida Gators. Now, I'm not saying they get to the line in elite level, but they get there more than the Houston Cougars. And also, Houston does have a tendency to foul a little bit. So if your offense is a little bit out of whack, you like those easy scoring opportunities. Take it to the rim, get fouled, make 2 free throw shots, because Houston will foul. And on the other side, if Houston isn't making their three-point shots at an elite level. And again, Florida's defense, top 6 in the country at defending the three-point line. Some of those easier buckets might come Florida's way here.
And Donnie, it's a really good point as well, with the physicality we expect, because both teams have that physical presence on either side. There's nobody that will be scared of that moment tonight. How tight is the whistle from the officiating crew? Could we see these teams get into the bonus, into the penalty early in a half, which will add up with some points and, of course, look to that total, 140 and a hook. I have bet the over at 137.5 with a 30% profit boost on our lovely FanDuel Sportsbook, taking it down ever so slightly. Why did I bet the over? Well, one, I have Florida winning a national championship, and I do believe that favors the Gators. But number two, Donnie, in our Fade the Public poll, when the least selected option for a national championship game from the betting public was the over, that gives me a little bit of something that maybe I am trying to fade. It will also be interesting looking at these two teams. Florida had gone over in its first 4 games of the Big Dance, the only under against Auburn on Saturday. But that game still got north of 150. Since the beginning of February, Florida has only played in 1 game that has seen fewer than 140 points, which is basically our total tonight. That was its first game in February against Tennessee, a Vols team that lost to Houston in the Midwest Regional Final in the Elite Eight. It looks a lot like how Houston wants to play basketball. The Cougs, as we saw Florida's team total of 70.5, has only allowed 2 opponents in its 19 games since the start of February to score more than 70 points in regulation. Gonzaga in the round of 32. The Zags totaled 76. And Texas Tech in its first game of February had 72 in regulation. Won that game in OT in H-Town, 82-81. That was Houston's last loss. They have won 18 straight entering tonight's national championship game. Again, I do believe it is correlated. I hear your point. I don't know if it's necessarily correlated as it must go over for Florida to win. I do think if the Gators do end up cutting down the nets, it is more likely to trend to the over than if Houston is our national champion at night end.
And by the way, we talk so much about the three-point shooting of both of these teams. And again, elite defenders at the three-point line. The difference also, the Florida Gators will chase you off a little bit more of that three-point line than the Houston Cougars. So if you're just looking, again, for correlated numbers, if I say to myself, if Florida has a good night tonight, and a good night, I mean hitting their team total, right? Over expectations, 72 points. A lot of those points are going to come from three-point range, which means they're knocking their three-point shot down. And also bet accordingly to that. Walter Clayton tonight, hey, he scored 28 points. You know damn well, Ben, that's at least 5 triples from Walter Clayton tonight going up against Houston. So sure. I do think the three-point line for Florida is going to be paramount. I'm not expecting a high number because why? Yes, they let you score, but they're elite defenders at the three-point line, which means hand in your face entirely. But if I'm looking at points props here, I'm actually looking more at the 3-point props than the points. Same thing with a guy, Thomas Houck. Hey, he scored 13 points or 11 points. You know that means at least, Ben, he made 1 3-point shot. So the 3-point correlation tonight with Florida, knocking their shots down when they're available, because you will be allowed to shoot the 3-point shot against Houston. But again, the question is going to be how many of those 3-point shots are actually going down tonight.
And how many are actually good looks? Houston being the most efficient defense in the country, DRS, they make it so difficult to find a quality shot. It's why when you look at the metrics, they'll allow their opponents to shoot more than 43% of the overall field goals from beyond the arc. But part of that is because it is so difficult to get a good look inside the arc or down low against the Cougs. You end up having to settle for a contested 3. If Florida can get some good opportunities, that could be all the difference. We'll talk about those player props, what they need to do from 3, how many points they need to score, how many rebounds they need to get. Next, it is time for Prop Watch now for our national championship game. We've explored every angle, side, matchup advantages, what it means for how many points we see tonight, which of course is our over-under total. DRS, let's look at the points props for the best players on the biggest stage of a college basketball season. We start on Florida's side, and when you start with the Gators, you start with Walter Clayton Jr. 19.5, his points prop. It is the highest number for tonight's national championship game, but the previous 2 for Clayton Jr. and UF, his number was north of 20 against Texas Tech. He had 30 in the Final Four against Auburn, sailed through his pregame points prop of 21.5, finishing with 34. I think one of the reasons, DRS, it's not on the rise is because he is playing the nation's most efficient defense tonight. What do you make of that 19.5 points prop for Walter Clayton Jr. against the Cougs this evening?
Just by volume, he probably should get that. Now, am I immediately betting and running to the window to take Walter Clayton Jr.? Not necessarily. I told you I'm more interested in 3-point prop bets, because if he does have 20-plus points, probably at least 4 of those are coming from 3-point range. And if he has a 30-point night, he's probably going ballistic from all over the court at that point here. But there is a correlation honestly, look at this ball game tonight, and you tell me the Florida Gators win this game without Walter Clayton Jr. getting 19.5 points. I don't think it's happening. So I would be confident to say that I'd rather take Walter Clayton at 19.5 points to the over than just taking the Florida Gators at the -1.5, because there's a chance Walter Clayton Jr. scores 24 points and they don't win this ball game tonight against the Houston Cougars. So I think there's a correlation on how well he plays. I just don't see any way possible, looking at that prop watch board right there, that Clayton doesn't get the 20 points, and the fact that the Florida Gators, that's going to be a correlation of how they play. But you look at Condon. We just had Tom Vecchio on the show, under 8.5 points. Makes sense. He hasn't gone anywhere near that in the last 4 games playing against elite competition. And it's not as if we're playing like Duke tonight, where that total might have been in the -150.5 range, let's just say. Right. But I do still find Houck at 10.5 points. I think 2 3-point shots is legitimate for him tonight, because that's going to be open. And also understand this, he does have a tendency to get to the free throw line. Now, late, I don't know what he was doing at the free throw line, but he was shooting free throws, which we told you that the Houston Cougars will foul you here. So Martin, Richard, and Hawk probably more likely to be on my board from a prop perspective than Walter Clayton, who I would just strictly go with 3-point props.
DRS, one of the reasons that Thomas Houck will be there to get to the charity stripe for Todd Golden's Gators, he trusts Houck to be out there in those foul scenarios late. He is better than an 80% free throw shooter this season. I believe ended 3 of 7 from the stripe on Saturday against the Tigers, but still found his way over 12 points. For Thomas Houck to make 1-3 tonight, it's -178. And that's the way the odds makers on FanDuel have you bet the 3-point props. 2+, 3+, 4+, not exactly an over-under, which means that 3+ made threes is where you find Walter Clayton Jr. for the first time at -250. LJ Cryer -152, that's second strongest price. Quick question here, DRS, on Walter Clayton Jr. If he stays under his points prop tonight, can Florida still win a national championship?
They can, but boy, you want to talk about a decreased number in that. So I would say they can, but I'm not confident. As I said, if Walter Clayton Jr. scores 14 points, they're not winning this basketball game. Like when we're talking about he has to have at least 19 points, as crazy as that sounds, because his number is 19.5. Like he literally has to get to that number, maybe finish a point lower, and somebody's going to have to go off against one of the nation's best defense. But constructive criticism today, Ben, here. FanDuel Sportsbook. Love it. Easy to use. Best website out there. Why don't we have the points just listed in order? Like, why do I have to click on the player to get his
Yeah.
total points? Like, I always know college basketball, it's a little bit different, I guess, the way they structure it. I never thought that made sense. It's so much easier to see it lined all the way down as opposed to clicking on each one. Like, well, we give you the 10, 15, 20, 25. No, just let me see them side by side at this point, like we put up on the graphic.
Yeah, I hear you. I'm just happy right now there is still props out for college sports at this moment. As we heard from JY, DRS, he expects Kelvin Sampson, as you might anticipate as well, to try to take away Walter Clayton Jr. as much as possible, which means looking at those second options. Thomas Houck scoring in double figures again. Elijah Martin, who had 17 as Florida's second leading scorer on Saturday and who has gone over 12.5 points in 4 of the 5 wins for the Gators in the Big Dance, would make a lot of sense. Let's go to Houston's side of things. Their leading scorer both on Saturday and the entirety of this season, that was LJ Cryer. 6 of 9 from 3, 26 points to lead Houston to the victory over Duke. When you try to find your best bet from Houston's scoring output, DRS, which Cougar are you targeting?
It's really hard because, again, we still sit because there's clear, demarcations where you take a look at Florida's side, right? It's Walter Clayton Jr. As far as they go, he's going to take him a boy. He's taking him far. And every single game, when you needed him to step up, at the end of the game, he has the mic in his face like, boy, how did you pull this one out over the final 6 minutes? There's so many different waves that you can hit from Houston that sometimes you don't want to outsmart yourself, right? Because you see Jon Roberts, 10.5 points, Yukon, 11.5, Sharp, 14.5, Cryer, 16.5. If I had to pick one of those players to say, I need a big game, I'm sorry, I got to go back to Cryer. Like, instead of just saying, like, it has to go as far as Clayton. Now, if we're looking at Cryer finishes with 12 points, I don't have that same urgency. Well, he didn't hit his number. You see Walter Clayton. It's different for me. More outlets, more different ways to score, but also from a guy that's already played in a Final Four game ban in that building and shot the lights out. I always stick with this premise. There's no way Cryer's coming into this night and saying, you know what? It's everybody else's night tonight from the three-point line. He is going to launch tonight, and that's the guy you should be focused on. So Walter Clayton Jr. should get there. I expect Cryer to have a game that's close to 20 points in this game because he already had that fire performance from three-point land. He's going to shoot, Ben, 8-9 triples tonight? I trust him.
Yeah. No doubt about it, DRS, which is what he has done throughout the NCAA tournament. He had one really bad game. That was against Purdue in the Sweet 16, has had at least 15 in every other, including a 30-point performance against Gonzaga and a 26-point performance against the Blue Devils. DRS, I tried to get a little too cute on Saturday. LJ Cryer was minus 136 to hit 3 threes, and I knew Houston would have to be great from deep to beat Duke. They were. I went to Milos Uzan to have 2+ at a minus 140 number. He stunk 1 of 4. Where do I go back tonight? Milos Uzan comes through over 11.5 points. I think that will be my favorite prop tonight. Jon Roberts, look at the rebounding number, 6.5. He is going to have to be great against a Florida team that is top 5 and crashing the offensive boards this year in college basketball. DRS, we send you off now to the money line, my friend. I'll see you tomorrow, bright and early.
Bright and early.
In studio. More on the early line next. A couple more minutes here on National Championship Monday on the early line on SportsGrid. I'll talk about the plan, the schedule, what you can expect on the SportsGrid network for your national championship coverage the remainder of this day in just a matter of moments. Some people have told me this is brown. I believe it's a dark olive green. It is my most green suit, if you will. I am wearing green today. I will be wearing green tonight on SportsGrid's Bracket Central National Championship Special alongside OK Dubs Kevin Walsh and our coach JY James Young, because I never thought I would do the Gator Chomp live on national television, but here I am. I need Florida big. First, for bragging rights in the SportsGrid bracket pool. Second, for some big money in my college buddies pool with more than 50 competitors trying to win more than $800 tonight, and cash a Florida National Championship ticket that I got at 11-1 back in early February based on the Ken Palm numbers, the metrics, and the trends that we had seen that could signify what it takes to win a national championship. Of course, Florida started this year at a 60-1 price to win a national crown. That number 11-1 back in early February, plus 360 before the tournament started after the field was unveiled. And as of this moment, the Gators an ever so slight favorite to cut down the nets as a national champion tonight in San Antonio. I'm trying not to root for Florida. Obviously, I've got to be a little bit objective and just try to detail a great national championship game that I hope for tonight. But if Florida wins, oh boy, my heart is going to be singing. A couple of other looks for you. If you trust in faith in the public loves overs. And so when the public doesn't want to bet an over based on Houston playing in a basketball game tonight, I kind of lean the over 140.5. Outside of really cheering home Florida to win this national championship because of the revenue payout it will mean for me. I also did grab Houston as a plus 450 number to win the national championship because I needed the Cougs to be in the title game, to beat Duke, to win all of these bracket pools I am laying out. I did bet Houston at plus 450 before their game against the Blue Devils on Final Four Saturday. I will also be looking at the over, as I said, with a fade the public sentiment, although no strong conviction there. And I'm going to go back to the drawing board. I think often when you get spurned by a player in the prop category, you say that player is dead to me. I'm never betting their number again. I'll go back to Milos Uzan tonight for Houston, expecting him to be a lot better from three. Only one made triple on Saturday against the Blue Devils because Kelvin Sampson trusts in his point guard, who was in a bunch of early foul trouble in the opening half and a bunch of foul trouble for the majority of the game. Milos Uzan over 11.5 points is a way I will look to approach this national championship game as well. Keep an eye on Jon Roberts in his rebounding prop. 6.5 has to be key tonight against those big bodies down low. Alex Condon, Ruben Chinyulu, Thomas Houck, Micah Hand-Logden, just to name a few for the Florida Gators. Ultimately, I picked Florida to win a national championship before the big dance started. I stick with that conviction in the Gators. And as we shared with many a pick six, either before the NCAA tournament began or the Final Four started this weekend, I had Walter Clayton Jr., Florida's best player, winning most outstanding player. And after a 34-point performance in the Final Four, even if he is a little bit lackluster tonight, I still would expect from a narrative perspective, he wins MOP. He is now a minus 110 favorite on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Tonight is the final college basketball game of this season. Of course, yesterday we saw UConn win national championship number 12 in women's college basketball. And there are many different varieties of a postseason tournament now in college hoops. The NIT, the CBI, and for the first ever year, the college basketball crown. I think you can poke fun at a lot of these tournaments. What's the significance? What meaning do they hold in this sport, especially in comparison to the big dance? I think that was what a lot of people were saying about the crown because it featured a lot of high major programs that have really struggled this year. But I think you saw on display yesterday in Las Vegas what it can mean. Nebraska with a huge second half rally, down by 14 points against UCF, coming all the way back to win the inaugural college basketball crown. And the Huskers were celebrating as though it had significance for their program, and I believe that it did. A Nebraska team that is yet to win an NCAA tournament game, but has now won an NIT and a college basketball crown. I think it will mean a lot. And I think you saw in the reaction of Fred Hoiberg, Bryce Williams, Jawan Gary in their final collegiate game that ending a season in the win column will always have some serious significance. We'll see you tomorrow on the early line at 8 a.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.